All right, welcome to this study. Today, we're acting as totally neutral observers to map out a really intense theological divide. We're going to be looking at exactly how different religious communities view the purpose and the potential danger of public debate. So here's our agenda for the study. We'll start with an introduction to GodLogic 2.0, move into the prohibition of debate, examine the double standard, compare approaches to apologetics, and finally get to the final verdict. Okay, Section 1. Introduction to GodLogic 2.0. This study analyzes a specific commentary from the source channel GodLogic 2.0. And hey, you can find a link to their original content directly below in the description box if you want to check it out for yourself. In this source, the host is reacting directly to a Muslim leader who's actively advising his congregation on how to handle religious debates. Moving right along, Section 2, the prohibition of debate. Listen to this exact phrasing from the Muslim leader. He actually argues that public debates divert Muslims from the truth and just cause confusion. He specifically instructs his audience that watching or participating in debates is completely prohibited. Why? Because, according to him, the intent of the opposing side isn't to find truth, but to lead people astray. He insists that if a debate absolutely has to happen, it should strictly be done in private, completely away from the public eye. Well, the channel issues a pretty harsh rebuttal to this prohibition, arguing that asking followers to avoid public discourse is literally a form of truth suppression. GodLogic 2.0 poses a really sharp question here. How could any faith claiming to be the absolute truth simultaneously shield its followers from opposing views? He even goes as far as comparing this tactic to how a cult operates, stating that suppressing open discussion is just a massive red flag. Section 3. Examining the double standard. So, this perfectly illustrates what GodLogic 2.0 sees as a glaring double standard. In one breath, the leader praises scholar Ahmed Deedat for thoroughly defeating Jimmy Swaggart, claiming Swaggart was entirely unprepared. But then, in the very next breath, when discussing a much tougher debate against Anna Shorosh, the leader totally changes his tune, claiming the opponent unfairly threw out rapid misconceptions. To put this into perspective, according to the source, the evangelist Anna Shorosh absolutely bombarded the Islamic scholar with 50 doubtful things during their encounter. The Muslim leader points to this massive number of rapid-fire questions as a deliberate tactic designed not to seek the truth, but simply to overwhelm the opponent and plant seeds of doubt in the audience's minds. The Muslim leader's argument here is that having just 30 minutes to rebut all 50 of those points was a totally unfair time constraint. Because the scholar could only address one or two issues in that really short window, the remaining unanswered questions supposedly lingered in the hearts of the Muslim viewers, leading to genuine confusion and, ultimately, a weakening of their faith. But GodLogic 2.0, he completely dismisses that time constraint argument. He states that an inability to answer every single question instantly shouldn't shatter a truly strong faith. He argues that believers shouldn't just jump ship and abandon their religion just because a single scholar couldn't address every point on a public stage in 30 minutes. To him, this isn't a valid reason to ban debates. It's honestly just an excuse to avoid tough conversations. All right, Section 4. Comparing approaches to apologetics. We've got two completely different philosophies on handling doubt here. On one side, the Muslim leader explicitly warns his followers not to share their doubts with family or friends to avoid confusing them, advising them to only speak to religious leaders in secret. In stark contrast, GodLogic 2.0 pushes for open, public defense. He encourages followers to jump right in, watch and learn, truly believing that facing pushback actually strengthens your faith. The speaker pushes his position further, asserting that Islam heavily borrowed from surrounding traditions. He claims Islam pulled teachings from the Torah, adapted material from the Talmud, and repeated historical ideas as truth. For GodLogic 2.0, these alleged theological overlaps are exactly why these discussions need to happen out in the open, not in secret. Essentially, the channel is arguing that public claims require public defenses. He completely rejects the idea that theological disagreements should be hidden behind closed doors. Because Islamic theology publicly asserts that Jesus was not crucified, which is obviously a core tenet of Christianity, GodLogic 2.0 insists that Christians have a real duty to publicly debate this. He finds it totally unreasonable to be asked to keep the conversation private when the theological challenge itself is being broadcasted to the public. So when one side says stop watching and the other says keep engaging, what is the ultimate takeaway the speaker wants you to walk away with? Which brings us to Section 5, the final verdict. GodLogic 2.0 interprets this avoidance of debate not as some kind of spiritual protection, but literally as a mechanism of control.
He claims that leaders telling followers to shut off debates are doing so out of sheer desperation and a desire for truth suppression. To him, it signals a deep-seated fear that the religion's foundation will just collapse under genuine public scrutiny.
The speaker actually points to a recent community event as supposed proof that public debate inherently damages Islamic credibility. While he doesn't dive deep into the specifics of the Sheikh Osman thing, he uses it as a recent, well-known example that, in his view, proves his overarching point. When these conversations happen in the light of day, the resulting scrutiny is exactly what the opposing leaders are desperate to avoid. And wow, the channel finishes with a highly opinionated, direct call to action, explicitly urging Muslim viewers to abandon their faith based on the actions of their leaders. GodLogic 2.0 really doesn't mince words here. He leverages the Muslim leader's advice against public debate as the ultimate proof of his claims, essentially saying, hey, if your leaders are acting this way, you shouldn't be following them. As we wrap up this full summary, we want to leave you with this final thought on the really delicate balance between protecting a community and fostering open theological inquiry. When religious leaders advise stepping away from the public square, are they wisely protecting their flock from bad faith arguments designed only to confuse? Or does shut-'em-down debate inevitably guarantee that opponents will accuse them of hiding the truth? It is a fascinating dynamic to observe, and we hope this study has helped you map out the rhetoric used on both sides of this intense theological divide.